people, and welcome to a special edition of On Air. Today, Friday, August 31st, 2012. As we move closer and closer to nominating the next president here in the United States, a number of women's issues have been talked about and have been on the table all over the place. From the Lilly Ledbetter Act, the Equal Pay Act for Women, Violence Against Women's Act, rape, abortion, contraception, and pro-choice versus pro-life, we ask our associations, or we ask you, should our associations say where they stand on a number of these issues that impact the lives of women well beyond them as distributors? Today, we take a look at what our associations had to say, those that did respond to that poll question, and we also take a look at what your responses were as it relates to those questions as well. Today, special edition here on Air, Direct Selling's Associations, the DSA, Direct Selling Association, DSWA, Direct Selling Women's Alliance, and the MLMIA, the Multi-Level Marketing International Association. Here, courage, politics, and leadership. Here on Air today. Welcome back to On Air. That was a special clip or a promo clip that we produced for the DSWA leading up to their 2006 leadership conference. Unfortunately, the DSWA did not use it. However, the message of that clip really speaks to the importance of today's topics, especially when it comes to our associations. The DSA, the Direct Selling Association, the DSWA, Direct Selling Women's Alliance, and the MLMIA, the Multi-Level Marketing International Association. Let me set the table for you. This year, of all years, direct selling has really been thrust into the political landscape, has really been pushed dragged and pulled into the political conversation. It comes to no surprise to a number of you, because we've reported on this for quite some time, that Amway has poured a lot of money into the Republican Party, and recently Melaleuca and its owner, Frank Van der Sloot, as well. Also, we're talking about For Life, and New Skin recently has also been identified as a company that have poured millions into the Republican campaign. Where they pour their money into is not of any great interest to me. What is of great interest to me is that direct selling is really entering into the conversation politically. Recent article by Harper's Magazine on August 17th also identified donations from Mary Kay and USANA, and just recently here in Los Angeles, the Los Angeles Times, August 25th, had a headline or a front page article called "Supplement Ties to Benefit Romney." What this also pointed out, or what they also pointed out in their article, is that other direct selling companies are pouring money into the into political campaigns. Most of them going to Romney, because a lot of them are Utah-based, and who they mentioned were Forever Living, Zango, and Ona V, among others. Why is this important to us? Because we are part of the American conversation here in direct selling. Regardless of who you are as a distributor or as an association, there's no getting around it. What impacts us outside of direct selling impacts us as we do our business here in direct selling. The average distributor in direct selling makes somewhere between $300 to $500 a month, if that much. Most of the people that make the really big money, about somewhere between 3 to 5% of distributors, really do this as a full-time business and really put their heart and soul into it. And they really drive their careers to being great direct sellers and creating direct selling businesses. Even with that said, we are a community of consciousness. We are a community of individuals with a lot of ideas, with a lot of concepts. We breathe, we smile, we're happy, we're sad. We go through all of these things. And there's no denying that we go through all of this. And as we go through all this, we are also paying attention to what happens outside of direct selling, particularly in politics today. If we look at politics today, and a lot of conversations are really centering around women's issues. And I'm a huge advocate for women having their voice, whatever it is that they want to say. We look at direct selling and look at the recent numbers by the DSA that just came out for 2011 on their global statistics, the World Federation of Direct Selling, which happens to be the DSA because they share the same address, they share the same phone number, they share the same suite. So in effect, the DSA is the World Federation of Direct Sellers. If we look at the global direct selling statistic for 2011, just based on their member companies, they have identified 91 million global direct sellers. If we also take a step back and look at what we typically have come to understand, that direct selling is comprised of 80% or more women, that's 72 million women around the world. As we look at the United States, we're talking about 16 million distributors, with 12 million of those being women. So when we look at the conversation politically, because it really does impact us as an industry, because distributors have to do their business, and most of them do their business part-time. So a lot of the issues as it relates to equal pay, more importantly as it relates to violence against women, some of the other issues, abortion, contraceptive, pro-life, some of those issues, but even some of the issues that have really become prevalent for us in the social conversation nationally here in the United States, the whole rape thing, it impacts direct selling women tremendously. We asked a poll question last week: should our associations let us know where they stand on some of these issues? A number of you said, in fact 86% of you said yes, you'd like to know where our associations stand on some of these issues. They might not tell us all of it, that I understand, because some of these issues are pretty hot button issues, but some of them should be pretty clear that they can say, yes, we agree with, no, we don't agree with that. It should be pretty clear. And yet, the response from the association to this point, and I will give you some of their responses verbatim, or in the case of DSA, as best as I can paraphrase it, because I did have a conversation with DSA President Joe Mariano yesterday and Amy Robinson of the DSA. Both of them were gracious enough to have basically an off-the-record conversation with me. But there is a comment or two that I can provide you with. As we look at what is going on in direct selling, I think we're at a crossroads. I think as we look at direct selling owners become more and more political and more have more and more political influence and power, I think that impacts the direct seller in a major, major way. I think we need to look at not only where that power is going, but more importantly, how do we extend some of that power and some of that voice to the distributors? Because right now, all of the voices politically that are being spoken by our direct selling owners. One of the things that I found as we began to look at this in 2008, when this thing really started to pick up for direct selling, Network Marketing Business Journal ran a number of articles on who they thought direct sellers should vote for. We also found out a couple of years later that the DSA had a political action committee called the DSA Political Action Committee. I tend to call it a secret political action committee, even though they don't agree with it, because distributors don't know about it. Even though my conversation yesterday with DSA President Joe Mariano, he said it's not a secret. Distributors can Google DSA Political Action Committee anytime they want. However, he did go on to say that very few distributors even know about the DSA. So to say that they can Google the DSA Political Action Committee, even though most distributors don't know about it, that doesn't make any sense. There is a way for distributors to know about it, and I'm not, by any stretch of the imagination, I understand. The fact that I talk about it is essentially doing the job for them. I get it. I really get it. So I'm not naive on that point. However, the DSA does have a political action committee. Also, in October of 2008, DSA Executive Vice President at the time, now DSA President Joe Mariano, actually wrote an article called Beyond Polls and Politics, Representing Your Interest. What he went on to say is that the DSA exists in Washington to represent your interests. We're lobbyists. Okay, of course you're lobbyists. We have a PAC, yes, but that is only a device to give financial support to candidates of any political party who have an understanding of what direct selling means to this country. The money in the PAC doesn't come from companies, it comes from individual executives who recognize the need for direct selling industry support so that they can make a difference. Okay, so we're splitting hairs there, the executives as opposed to the companies. We are really splitting hairs there. It's essentially the same thing. The DSA Political Action Committee has received, this is in 2008, contributions from only a handful of executives and supported some 18 candidates. Who they were, who they are, we have absolutely no idea, but apparently these candidates are representing the entire direct selling industry, certainly here in the United States. Distributors have absolutely no idea who they are. From both parties. They have donated to both parties, so they are nonpartisan. One of the things that I found striking about the article is he went on to say, we cannot afford to let our businesses and livelihoods rest on the involvement of a handful of executives. Back then, only a handful of executives were put into the DSA Political Action Meeting. And he recognized then, we cannot allow our voices to be determined by just a handful of executives. We also found out that the MLMIA has written a number of articles suggesting that distributors write their congresspeople about a particular issue. It could be about taxes. Once you enter into that, once you start doing that, you are now in the public policy debate. Once you start recommending that distributors do a certain thing politically, you are now in the public policy debate, whether you like it or not. One of the things that we also found is that from a DSWA standpoint, they want to stay back, they want to stay away, they want to push back from anything political, which is fine, if that's what you want to do. But here's my question for all of the associations, with so many women in direct selling, and even if we were to just look at the Violence Against Women's Act, equal pay, because the majority of women have a part-time job. They need their job in order to continue to do their business. Should they not be getting equal pay for equal work as men? Well, I don't think you're going to find any woman on the planet who's going to say no. So that's easy to support. Violence against women, easy to support. I grew up watching my mother being beat a lot by my father and my stepdad. I come to find out years later, found out my sisters were being molested by my stepdad. So violence against women is a big, big issue for me. As it relates to the recent conversation about rape, I have dated a number of women who have gone through that, and it is not a pretty picture. Of course, anyone with any sense is against rape. These should be easy things to get behind. But still, our associations have nothing that they want to say about it, which is absolutely surprising, because the history of direct selling is that the majority of all businesses, products sold, businesses created, everything has all been built on the beautiful shoulders of women. We have some of our major companies, from Avon to Mary Kay, who support Violence Against Women's Act, and yet I'm surprised the DSWA can't even come forward to say we support the Violence Against Women's Act. If you're going to follow any particular company, and this also goes for the MLMIA and the DSA, if you can't support the Violence Against Women's Act, what can you support? 80% of all distributors are women. If you're a woman and you're over at the DSWA, you understand what violence against women mean. But yet the DSWA and the DSA and the MLMIA refuse to have anything to say about it. I will say this. Even though they were all invited to come on air and give a comment, as I said, graciously, Joe Mariano, president of the DSA, and Vice President of Communications, Amy Robinson, did give me a call. I enjoy talking to them. As we all agree, we're not always going to be on the same page, but we do want the same thing. We want a stronger industry that can do greater things. And the same thing goes for the DSWA. I love what the DSWA does. I would love for them to be more. That's my thing. I would love for them to represent more. If they represented more, they can be stronger. The MLMIA, they're still trying to they're still going through some things, but they can be stronger as well. When I come back, we're going to really get into some of the poll numbers and what some of you had to say, because it's really, really interesting. And I'm also going to share what comments I can share from Joe Mariano and what DSWA co-founder Nikki Kihohoho sent to me just a couple of hours ago when I come back.
No family can survive on 2 incomes anymore, let alone 1. If you are supplementing your family's income working from home, then tune into The Cash Flow Show, Direct Sales Radio. Host Deb Bixler brings you sales tips, lead generation systems, and best business practices that guarantee direct sales success. Whether you're looking for a little extra cash or a career change, The Cash Flow Show, Direct Sales Radio will give you proven systems that will work in your home business. The Cash Flow Show, every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific Time on World Talk Radio Variety.
Welcome back to On Air. As you know, we're talking about direct selling associations, politics, courage, and leadership. Last week, we asked a poll question, the DirectSellingLive MLMBlackWoman Poll question. Should our associations tell us where they stand on issues as it relates to violence against women, equal pay for women, the whole rape conversation, abortion, marriage equality, contraception, and a woman's right to choose? Now, I know as soon as I put the poll question together, there were going to be some pretty hot topics in there that our associations probably would not and should not even get into. I get it. There are some there you shouldn't even touch with a 10-foot pole. However, there are a couple of them in there that you absolutely should be able to say that you support. And if you're looking for any political cover, a couple of the companies that you can emulate on that are Mary Kay and Avon. Both of these major companies for women support the Violence Against Women's Act. Now, knowing that they support the Violence Against Women's Act, I don't believe there was a mass exodus of their customers or their distributors because they came out in support. In fact, I think they may have garnered a lot more support and more women appreciated who they are and what they're all about. If you're an association that represents an industry that has 91 million distributors worldwide, 72 million of those being women. Here in the United States, 16 million distributors, with 12 million of those being women, and that's just based on the DSA's numbers, who are basing that on their member companies. Of course, the numbers are probably much, much larger than that. How can you not say we support the Violence Against Women's Act? What this does is it allows you to communicate with the distributors in direct selling in a much more deeper way, a much more emotional way. We begin to realize that you are really interested in more than just who we are as distributors. Our lives beyond direct selling become important to you as much as it is important to us, the individual distributor. As I look around and we began to put the poll question together, what we found is that 86% of all of the people who took the poll believe the associations should make a statement on some of these topics. Only 14% disagreed. Those that disagreed happen to think that the reason is, based on a couple of comments, that an individual's right to comment should not be the same as an organization. Or as one person put it, an employee should not need to share who they are with their employer and vice versa, their employer versus their employee. However, we're talking about associations here. Once you become an association, you now are an organization that's in the social construct. You are there. You are part of the conversation because you now represent a large majority of people. So anything that you say and do can be used to talk about you, even if you don't want it to. Even your silence on some things speaks louder than what you don't say. I think for the most part, the association that is probably missing this more than any other is the Direct Selling Women's Alliance. Now, they don't want to get into anything political. They don't want to have any social commentary. But their lack of commentary is commentary. A number of women have said, when will the DSWA say something? Okay, we understand the DSA. They're a bunch of guys over there, even though they're not completely guys, but I understand where they're coming from. And the MLMIA is not as big as the other two. However, the Direct Selling Women's Alliance, they should be able to say something on the Violence Against Women's Act, equal pay for women, and yes or no on the whole rape thing. I think we all know where the DSWA stands on that. I don't think we really need to get into that conversation. As I said, if you're looking for political cover, all you have to do is emulate what Mary Kay and Avon did, two of the largest, Avon being the largest direct seller in the world. As I said, there was a mass exodus of distributors for them, and if the DSWA were to come forward and just say that, I think their numbers may begin to swell. They may be able to do more, and even more for the DSA. We are in the middle of what I call a serious crossroads here in direct selling. And why I say that is as our direct selling owners gather more and more political power, they will begin to determine the direction of direct selling for everybody. Because they will be the ones who have the political power. They will be the ones that the politicians go to. All of you know, I've been talking about there's got to be a way for direct sellers to get into this conversation. Interestingly enough, in my conversation with Joe Mariano and Amy Robinson yesterday, when I was talking about their political action committee, I know that they would like to have distributors somehow get into conversation. I know they can't do it based on who they are. And so, in effect, I get to be a voice for them in talking to distributors, not only about the political action committee, but about the need for distributors to create a political voice that our associations can somehow rally around. One of the things Joe Mariano did say is that there's not a mechanism in place to talk about it. Well, that's an extremely simple fix. Most distributors are proud when their companies say we are part of the DSA. So I happen to think a majority of distributors know that they're part of the DSA. If you want to let distributors know that they're part of the DSA, all you have to do, there is such thing as social media. That's it. Doesn't mean you have to recruit them because you can't. But there is such a thing as social media. 86% of those people who took the poll want to know what the DSA, DSWA, and MLMIA think on social and political issues. Because there's no way of getting around it. We are so polarized politically here in the United States, and even more so in the world. We want to know where people stand. It's that important to us. We've seen, as I said, a number of our companies, and most recently we've seen, those that have been written about are Forever Life, Zango, Pona V, who else? USANA, and there was one other that I mentioned earlier. They are getting into the conversation. As it relates to the DSA and the Political Action Committee, I think what's happening here is that companies are bypassing the Political Action Committee and going direct, because thanks to the Citizens United ruling, they can go direct to their candidate and give them as much as they want. And through super PACs, they can do it even greater. We've seen this with Amway. We've seen this with Melaleuca. We've seen what has happened. More power to them. I get back to this. Distributors need to have a voice, and apparently our associations aren't going to be that voice for them. They want nothing to do with it. I think it's a big mistake. I think it's a huge mistake, because there are certain issues that are so vitally important to the life and the lifestyle of a distributor. We need to know with the people who we are involved with, somehow, some way, in some instances, are think along the same lines as us. For the DSA, it's your great opportunity to let distributors know who you are, and when you go out and represent them, as you stated in 2008, Joe Mariano, that we are lobbyists. Distributors should know who you are. The DSWA, to this day, I am shocked. And I know you don't like me talking about this, but I'm going to continue to drive this point home because I think it is that important. 86% of the people who took the poll, some 340, took the poll, said they think our associations should let them know where they stand on social and political issues. Now, one thing I found strikingly interesting yesterday in my conversation with Joe Mariano and Amy Robinson, Joe Mariano tends to think that the polling that we have done over the past couple of years, it's not that big a deal. It may even be a fake poll. There's just really not enough there to let us know what people are thinking. There's enough people to tell you what they're thinking. Anyone who participates in the poll lets you know where what they're thinking, and it's easy to extrapolate from any number where we're actually going with this. These are very general polls, and yet they give very specific answers. When you had the, when you said that you thought that the poll didn't have as much legitimacy, just my word there, as it should, what that told me is that you think the people who took the poll really don't represent direct selling in the way you think they should. And I think that that's not a fair assessment of the situation at all. I think a much more fair assessment would be for you all to take a step back and say, wow, when it comes to what they want to talk about, violence against women, should associations talk about it? Even when it came down to the comment that was made for me by an association head, and no, it was not you, Joe Mariano, as I said yesterday. Just be perfectly clear about this. It was not Joe Mariano, but it was an association head. Easily. I know, because I know the person. When we talked about the situation or the poll, company owners, some company owners don't think blacks work hard enough, which is why they don't recruit blacks here in direct selling. These are really important issues. And what's surprising about that particular poll, that's the one poll that Nikki Kehoho of the DSWA actually left a comment on. So when she left a comment on, she jumped into the social conversation. I don't know what to tell you. I think this is what needs to happen. You guys had better get your act together, because I think in the not too distant future, there's going to be someone or some organization or association that actually is created that will allow distributors to actually talk about the things that are important and then take those voices forward politically, well beyond Direct Selling Association, DSWA, and MLMIA. The distributors are talking. The distributors saying, you need to go in a different direction. We need to have our voices heard. And if you're not going to listen, you very well may pay a very dear price. When I come back, I'm going to close. See you in a minute.
When my mother used to sell Princess House.
Joined them way that night.
Norma siempre vendía cosas de Avon.
Oh, it must have been around 1935.
But those knives were amazing.
The one lady's name was Mary Kay, and I said, oh, cosmetics will never sell on Party Plan.
Was a single mom and created these hair care products for black women and became the first self-made millionaire in the United States. I just think that's extraordinary.
Welcome back. Before I go, I'm going to share a comment that I got from Nikki Kehoho, the co-founder of the DSWA, the Direct Selling Women's Alliance, as it relates to our poll question. We invited all of the associations to come on air and state their position. Their position could be just about anything that they wanted, but we just wanted them to come on and share what their thoughts were on our poll question, and of course, what it had to do with violence against women, equal pay, abortion, contraception, pro-life, pro-choice, whatever. As I recognized earlier, some of these are extremely hot button issues, and some of them not even I would want to touch. But there are ways around that. There are ways of discussing and talking about them without getting into it. As I also said, there are a couple here that are just absolutely no-brainers, which are the Violence Against Women's Act and possibly even the Equal Pay for Women, because most distributors, being women, need to have their regular job. And so you want to support them so that they can go forward doing their business without having as much financial constraint or financial pressures as they may have. And that's where the equal pay comes in. Earlier this year, I had announced on Direct Selling Live who our Power 50 were. And of course, DSWA co-founders Nikki Kihoho and Grace Kihoho were the co-founders. In fact, they have both ranked pretty high. And on our Women of Power, the Power 30, they're usually somewhere in the top 10, maybe even the top 5. And we invited them to come on and just talk about some of the things that are going on with them, because, you know, we want to promote them when we can. In that particular response back, it basically said that they're extremely busy and we're not available to do your show anytime in the near future. So when we sent out the response and asking for a response, or we sent out the email asking for a response from the association, this being Doris Wood of the MLMIA, Amy Robinson, Vice President of Communications and Marketing for the DSA, and Joe Mariano, President of the DSA, both Nikki and Grace Kihoho, to see if we can get a comment, or more importantly, ask them to come on air and let's talk about a few things. Because I'm really all about engagement. I'm really all about let's talk and see where we're at. Let's educate. Let's see where we can go with this stuff. I finally got an email after 4 or 5 days of not hearing from the DSWA. Doris Wood of the MLMIA got back to me in a matter of minutes. She said she'd love to actually do an interview about some of the things. And I know where she's at on some of this stuff, so I'm not going to be a bit surprised. But that just shows courage, that she's willing to talk about some things. She's willing to come on and say, this is where we're at and why. I also thought there was a tremendous amount of courage by Joe Mariano and Amy Robinson for giving me a call yesterday and wanting to talk about some of the things. And we talked about a number of things, but as it related to this issue, they really wanted to talk about it. And graciously, Joe Mariano gave a comment that essentially said, we are so focused on just the direct selling business and talking, helping the industry get the type of recognition with politicians and things like this. We have so limited resources, we have to stay right here. This is where we have to focus on. Great. Very, very simple, very, very easy. I get it. The DSWA, as I said, I got an email from Nikki this morning that says, Dear Keeper, thank you for thinking of us. Grace and I, excuse me, that has an old one. It just says, the DSWA is an educational association that supports independent direct sellers in building their businesses. We have no intention to be a political or lobbying organization. The DSWA will not speak on behalf of our membership now or in the future with our opinions or their views regarding political issues. Fine. Great. That's all you had to say. However, some of these issues go well beyond political issues. Violence against women, that's a social issue. That's a woman's issue. That's a human issue. And that's one you very easily can get behind. As I said, you've got Avon and Mary Kay to give you cover if that's what you need. Every woman should know that the DSWA supports the Violence Against Women's Act. There will be people who want to use it as a political football. No. But that's something that you can do. Equal pay for women? Yeah. That's something that you can do. Anything can be construed as political. Just about anything. But where courage and leadership reside, only a few people can go there. Only a few. As I said, I think there's going to be some organization, some group, someone that's going to form that gives voice to women in direct selling on social and political issues and not leave it up to the men who own the companies. Have a great day.